Welcome, warriors and wanderers. We are breaking down the business world, exploring the world of gaming, and strategizing our way through new ideas and perspectives. This is the RedKatanas Podcast.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, my name's AJ, and I am your host for the RedKatanas Podcast. Changed up my scenery just a little bit. All of this stuff on the walls, all that was already technically there while I was filming the other podcasts, or the other episodes, but I was on the other side of the room. So switched everything up, kind of changed how everything looks, have portrait lights, my snowboard, and the katanas that brought about the name RedKatanas. I'm not 100% sure if there's any going to be like actual significance behind the name RedKatanas outside of the fact that I have 3 red katanas on my bookshelf next to my ukulele and some different foam swords that I claim are my 3-year-old sons and my 4-year-old daughters, but they look sweet, so I'm going to keep them up there. So again, my name's AJ. I'm going to be your host. This podcast, we're going over the SMMA course. I'm going to give you kind of a sneak peek into that. Again, if you're looking at getting into the social media marketing agency world, if you're looking at getting into Amazon dropshipping world, if you're looking at getting into the ghost YouTube creation world, those are all things that I provide in the community if you go to kingswork.pro. So that is going to be the first set of what we're doing. So let's just dive right into the SMMA course. So like I said on previous podcasts, the SMMA course is available. If you go to kingswork.pro, there is a community there that has access to the 2 different courses that are currently offered. It's going to be the SMMA course, which stands for Social Media Marketing Agency. And then the second one is going to be the Ghost YouTube Creator, where essentially you make money off creating YouTube videos and never having to show your face, never having your person or character to be in the public eye. So let's get into what exactly the social media marketing agency course dives into. The core of the content is, again, just like the rest of the podcast that I put out, a lot of it, I heard this quote a couple years, probably about 6-7 years ago now, that 10% of success comes from actual step-by-step processes, right? It only 10% of what you do to become successful comes from all the know-how, all the knowledge and the information. The other 90% is all actions and attitude. And so I said that last podcast that those are the only 2 things that you can actually control is what you do, your actions, and your attitude is what your thought process and your mental state towards your actions are. So again, that kind of ties really well into how the social media marketing agency course is set up, the SMMA course. So going through essentially just like the background for the core of the content in this course is there isn't necessarily a ton of fluff, right? It's all known content. There's all known results. It's set up with the best team. There's the ability to essentially have certified step-by-step walkthroughs of how everything happens. There's an entire section. Essentially, the first section is, like I was saying, is a lot of the mindset side of everything. It's about how to deal with rejection, specifically in the SMMA realm. You have to deal with essentially not being 100% successful all the time. And people, I would say, get twisted what success actually is about, because when you go to school, the way that everyone wants to be the A student, right? Everybody wants to get the 100%. And then when you get out of school, well, you go from elementary school or primary school, where it doesn't necessarily mean a ton to get 100%. It's more of like, okay, you're creating a foundation. How good can you create your foundation before you actually get into the real world, right? Because that's essentially what it's there for, right? That's primary school. Secondary school or high school or middle and high school for a different half of the Western world. Essentially, the United States, it's middle and high school. In the European side of everything across the Atlantic Ocean, it's primary and secondary school. So in the secondary school or the high school or middle school side of everything, that's when middle school more or less is kind of like the buffer period of you get good, bad, or good or bad grades, and it determines what your foundation is and where you're going to be at in high school, right? But your grades, if you get hundreds on everything, 100% on everything, which I'll get into my personal opinions about that afterwards. But essentially, if you get 100% on everything, you're gonna be pushed into higher placement tests, right? You're gonna be placed into higher placement classes. You're gonna be placed into different environments depending on what kind of school you're going into, whether it's public school, private school, etc., or if it's one of those like insane genius schools. That's kind of the realm of what you're doing. That's primary and middle school is there to set you up like that, right? The high school side of everything, you get graded on everything. Everything matters to everything because high school is what directly translates to college or going to university. And then university, as of 40, 50 years ago, university or college is what was going to provide you with the path and the road towards the top level of average or above average lifestyle. And then once you get into the real world, you figure out that 100% is unrealistic. 100% or getting an A plus in anything in life is mentally and emotionally detrimental to your health. There's no realm where you become a competent and confident adult where you think, I'm going to go and do this. I'm going to go do something. I'm going to go work. I'm going to go have a family. I'm going to go into this relationship. And I'm going to be successful, get to 100%, and I'm going to use the tactics that I used in high school and college to get my 100%. And that's what's going to make me successful in the relationship side of everything, the career side of everything, the family side of everything. That's freaking horse crap. There is no realm where a competent and confident adult walks around saying, I'm going to get 100% and I'm just going to, I wasn't 100% before, but I'm going to beat my living brains out with studying. And that's how I'm going to be successful in my relationship with my husband or my wife. That's how I'm going to be confident and competent in my relationship with my children, at my career field. I'm going to be 100% correct all the time because no matter what, I will just study for the 16 hours that I'm not hanging around my family or my children or my relationship, my spouse or my boyfriend or my girlfriend or in the career place. Nobody ever says that. It's not a thing. And if you're under the age of 18 and if you're under the age of 22, 23, 24 and you're still in college or high school and you're listening to this, I guarantee you've heard this in other places. Social media is an insane tool that, just a random opinion, but I would say that it gets it gets abused and used for things that's not necessarily super productive, but it's also a valuable tool to be able to use to go on a day-to-day basis and gather an insane amount of information. I would not be able to do what I'm doing right now with a lot of different key people that I follow on social media, on my Instagram, my Twitter, my Facebook, my TikToks. And it's all very catered towards a very specific type of profile, person, set of information, the messages that they send out, etc. But going back to the point, 100% in anything means nothing. If you look at, I'm gonna relate with the guys real quick, and even if it's a guy that's not super into sports, I'm not insanely interested in sports as far as a spectator goes. I love participating in sports. I love playing any and all sports. I played almost every sport the United States has to offer. I've played some sports that other countries have are more prevalent in and having to offer. But essentially the relation to the guys that are out there is going to be in baseball to be successful at batting. Your batting average, if you're above a .333 in batting, that means you hit the ball 33.333% of the time. 1 out of every 3 shots you can connect with the ball. You're essentially a major league phenom. That's 33%. You go to middle and high school and college and you get a 33%, that's an F. But in the real world, you get an F, and the parents and the professors and the teachers and your peers all look at you like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? Are you okay? That's what people do to students that get 33%. But when a Major League Baseball player gets to 33%, they get 7-8 figure checks in their pocket. Just food for thought. In the real world, nobody gets anything 100%. So that's kind of that entire few minutes of me monologuing about that that's kind of what it's surrounded by, right? It's going to be a weird shift in focus if you're more used to the very structured academic world, which one of these times I'm actually going to get into a fun monologue what I have about the public education system and some different studies that I did while I was in high school that kind of made me sit back and look at the public education system and figure out, like, someone is teaching me a subject, sure. What is the end goal of all of this? But that's...
For all the gamers and fitness enthusiasts out there, have you heard about W.GG? It's not just a pre-workout, it's a lifestyle. Whether you're leveling up in the gym or gearing up for an intense gaming session, W.GG has got your back. With their unique blend of energy-boosting ingredients, it's the secret weapon to help you crush your goals. And guess what? They've got some killer merch as well. Check out their website for some seriously cool gear that screams victory. Use discount code KINGSWORK at checkout for an exclusive 10% discount.
A lot of the different things that we're going through in this course is going to be a lot of mindset, especially the first section. It's going to be essentially dealing with how to think about something, how you're supposed to intake the information that you're getting from the course itself, and then from potential clients, and then from how other people are going to be reacting to you, how to deal with different things that are going to be happening on the social media side of everything when you're onboarding clients, because this course teaches you not just to have the typical social media marketing agency, but also have the SMMA portfolio of an international style of business, if that makes sense. So we go through all the different pieces of information inside that course. So the community rules that are also walked through in this course, and they're in every course that we have, is if you're going to be part of the community, if you're going to be part of the course, your actions are going to be speaking louder than words. Because at the end of the day, people can say whatever they want to. And if you're a man, and this is again me just targeting the men, if you're a man, be a man of your word. But that being said, let your actions back up your words. So much so that let me restart that. Let your actions be so loud that the words that you say get hidden behind the actions that you have out there. So that's the first rule. The next thing is going to be no self-promoting. All right. Everyone's there to succeed. Everyone's there to get their piece of the pie. Part of that mindset is that there is no limit, right? The world has an insane amount of resources. Not one person has the ability to take over the entire world and to take all of its resources. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that out there, but it's unrealistic to think that one person is going to be so greedy that they take the entire world. One, people won't let them, and two, it's a lot to handle. It's a lot to manage. I know millionaires that are stressed out of their minds because they have so much stuff on their plate that they're trying to give responsibility to other people to take responsibility of big sections, and they give the responsibility with a big paycheck attached to it because one person can only handle a certain level of responsibility and input coming in from other people. That's essentially when you start running a company at a higher level, when you start running an agency at a higher level, when you start running any organization at a higher level. That's essentially the problem that you're going to end up getting into between the 7 and 8 figure mark when you start making that kind of money, or when you start managing that kind of money. You don't even have to be making it. If you're responsible for that kind of money, that's essentially the threshold, the glass ceiling that you got to figure out how to get around. And a lot of that comes from being around a good team, which again, this course goes through setting up the most baller style of a team, getting the right people with the key skill in the right places to make sure that the entire agency is set up so that it can run effectively and efficiently, more or less on its own, but in a way that you're able to focus on the biggest, most important pieces of responsibility, not dealing with all little things. So yeah, so that kind of goes into self-promoting. There's only abundance. There is no scarcity of resources. There's no scarcity of money. There's no scarcity of relationships. There's no scarcity of love out there. Be in an abundance mindset, right? But there's no self-promoting. Everyone's trying to get to the top. Everyone's trying to make their money, right? Everyone's trying to get their band. You got to be able to work together as a team in a symbiotic relationship that isn't just, hey, everyone should come and look at me, look at my logo, come look at my company, my agency, do what I'm doing, or come join my side and start poaching people out of there, because it takes away from the community as a whole. And at the end of the day, you don't necessarily need to do that, because everyone has their own networks to be able to pull from as far as people are concerned. And promoting, we're going to be teaching you how to promote on your own in the realm where you're going to get a ton more people than just the people that are in the community. So let's see, give before taking. If you guys are having conversations, if you guys are bouncing ideas back and forth, if you tried one thing and it works and someone tried something and it didn't work and you guys collaborating on it, the biggest thing, again, I talked about this in episode 1, is my philosophy is I'm lifting where I stand. I'm providing more value than I'm taking in at every step of the way that I possibly can. At some point, you give so much that you just end up having to take a little bit of an influx of take, but at that point you're okay, because nobody expects you to be the greedy. I'm trying to find the appropriate words. I'm trying to make this family friendly. You're not going to be the greedy son of a gun that is just taking all the time. People expect you to give endlessly, so they're okay with making sure that you're taken care of as well. Okay, give before you take, and positive and rise above the noise. Positivity, rising above the noise. Again, actions and attitude. You can only control 2 things: control your actions, control your attitude. So, like I was saying, it goes through a ton of mindset. You got to be able to be resistant to the negativity that's out there, because there's negativity everywhere. You can choose to be positive, and it's not always going to translate to you. Other people from the outside perspective that have an unbiased perspective of what's going on, they might look at you and be like, wow, he looks really stressed, and you're just working on being positive. Don't worry about it. Just make sure you are competing with yourself, right? It's a you versus you game. We made the course simple, but not necessarily easy, right? It's anything that's worth it is not going to be easy, and anything that's easy is not going to be worth it. So that is words to live by. Staying committed, like I was talking about for guys, but this just goes for everybody in general. Stay committed. If you want it, essentially you got to let yourself, in my experience, the people that go and achieve more were in a place where the life that they were living was too far away from the life that they wanted, that it became painful to be where they're at, so they made a change. They made a change internally, they made a change in their mind, and then they made a change externally, and it started producing results. And they just stayed in the game until it started producing results. So I would say that as far as staying committed. I've been really working on not saying I like it as like an interjection in some points of what we're talking about, but saying is unprofessional and something that I'm working on. So not everyone's perfect. The next thing as far as mindset goes, and this is going to be something that might be a little bit harder to grasp. Perfectionism is a distraction. Do not get so caught up, like we were talking before, don't get so caught up in the 100% mentality. We're thinking that you have to be at the 100% level for it to matter. And what we're talking about here, it goes through this in the course, but let's say, for instance, that they're having you make a logo, right? The course is walking you through making the logo. And the logo, the course gives you a certain time period. It says, okay, in 20 minutes, figure out the niche. All right. Now figure out the color scheme based off psychological marketing preferences that people have. Yellow is more optimistic and happy. Red is based off power. Blue is based off more trustworthy, blah, blah, blah. Right. If they give you a lot of time for 20 to 30 minutes to do it, it's because that's essentially the max amount of time where efficiency meets effectiveness at that point, the sweet spot between those two. Because efficiency and effectiveness don't necessarily operate in the same realm, right? But if you can find a sweet spot between the two to kind of come to a point and use that as your reference to be able to take off and go on a path, that's kind of where you want to be. But if you're so distracted by perfectionism that you are worried more on effectiveness than you are on efficiency, then you're going to end up getting muddled in all the different details. And it's going to take away from the end goal. It's going to take away from the end result of what you're trying to do. It's going to take you way longer than it needs to, and it doesn't need to. That's essentially what the course is about. That's what the community is about. These are all tried and true ways of creating. Essentially, for this system, it's going to be SMMA, and for the other courses, it's the same thing. See, and that was one example of essentially focusing on more effectiveness. If you focus more on efficiency and making everything as easy as possible, that's just lazy. So you're either way too detail oriented, it's going to take you forever, or you're just way too lazy and nothing will ever get done. So you got to, again, find that sweet spot and be able to take that on. Own your part. Obviously, do your part. If you're going to be part of a community and people are working together and being able to collaborate with other people, again, own your part. Be responsible for what you're being responsible for, right? So it goes through a few different things: understanding the market, understanding clients, whether it's the local side, the national level, or the international level. Again, it keeps going through mindset. And I want to say one of the most important things, I've said this in another podcast, where people are the most important thing. A big section of this goes into how to form an elite team, right? Working off of the archetypes of the type of person that you want with the key skills and put them in the right position with the right amount of responsibility to be able to accelerate yourself into having an effective and efficient agency, right? Knowing how to weed out the people that don't fit and why, and being very quick. I heard Gary Vaynerchuk, I hope I didn't butcher his name, but Gary V, he said this beautifully, where one of his superpowers, and he's talked about this before, is how do you hire the right person? And his entire thing was, you hire based off of principles and skill sets that you want, and you fire fast. That is just how it works. If people don't fit, they don't fit. Don't try and force them. Don't try to force a square into a circle hole. Don't force the star into the heart-shaped hole, right? It's very simple. We learn this as kindergartners and preschoolers dealing with blocks. So that's that. Putting your organic process for attracting clients. There's an entire process that's set forth for you. Make sure you shoot your shot. Don't be afraid to connect with clients. Don't be afraid to have that conversation, to get out there and be a little more extroverted. I've kind of created I would say, middle ground between extroverted and introverted. I get really recharged by being introverted, but I get lots of energy from being extroverted, if that makes any sense. Being recharged, I feel, is different than having energy, but you got to be able to balance the two, right? So if you're more introverted, I work on being and getting yourself into a spot where you develop habits that allow an extroverted side of you to be useful, right? And so typically when people are introverted and they don't want to be more exuberant, they don't want to be more expressive, etc., it's more or less because one, they've locked themselves into the idea that they're shy, right? They've locked themselves into the idea, is this just the way I am? But you're able to use that, because more or less that's just feelings. And feelings aren't something that control you. Feelings are something that you use as a tool, because your feelings are going to come and go, be there, don't be there, etc. That's why you got to develop habits. That's why you got to develop consistency. And that's why you got to develop routines, because your consistency, your habits, and your routines will bring you through every period, every up and down of life, right? So get some habits and some consistency and some routines, and being more extroverted. If you're more extroverted, work on understanding why introversion is a good thing. There is value in being in solitude. You don't have to be around people all the time. And you should probably relax a little bit. I only can say that from experience, because I'm more of a overbearing, energetic type. At least I was when I was a little bit younger. Kind of switched more or less to the analytical and chameleon type more so, just because I can use it. It's more analytical for me. The energy and the just straight vibration that can come out of me, out of my soul, basically, is more natural. And I've had to logically break down the analytical side of it and the chameleon side of it and use those to my advantage. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a great book out there. It's called Wired That Way. So it talks about 4 different types of person. Don't get so wrapped up in there's 4 different types. And, oh, I'm these 2 types, so I can't be these 2 types, or I'm these 2 types, and I can't be these 2 types. Use it as a tool to be able to identify what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and mold yourself into more of a understanding person where you get the other side of everything, but you also get what the value of each of those different 4 things are, right? And there's kind of a Christian foundation to that book. It's kind of cool. It talks about how Jesus essentially, or how Peter, James, John, and Luke are all different, one of each of those 4 different types of person. It's the cleric, the melancholy, the sanguine, and the phlegmatic. And each of those people emulates one of those characteristics, and you can kind of tell in how they speak, where the cleric is essentially just straightforward to the point. I want to get things done. Give me the list of A, B, C, and I will do A, B, and C the way A, B, and C is meant to be done. The sanguine is more of the energetic, bubbly, bouncing back and forth, not being able to understand it. So you kind of see that in those scriptures in the Bible. They break down essentially how that apostle talked. So I want to say, I forget which ones are which, but essentially one of the apostles, you can kind of see he was way more elaborate with describing things. The trees were green, the water was blue, the sand was coarse, blah, blah, blah. And I want to say John, I'll remember this, was the cleric, where he was like, Jesus did this, and then we went on a boat, and then we made sure that this got done. And it was very straightforward to the point. His chapters aren't super long. They're very direct, and they point you in a right direction as far as Jesus' life. Then you have the melancholy, more analytical, was breaking everything down, understanding the data. Jesus went here and did this, and this is kind of how it happened, and this is what was going on, and this is why it makes sense. And then the phlegmatic is more of the chameleon, more of a go with the flow kind of a person, not trying to be the enforcer, not trying to think too much about it, not trying to have all the energy, but kind of just swaying back and forth. And so I guess one of the apostles was more like, yes, and then we went to this way, and then we did this thing, and then we had this feast, and then this guy chopped off an ear, and I was so confused. That's just essentially what the book was, what that book referenced to Wired That Way, or what it referenced to the Bible. And then it also talks about how Jesus was the perfect combination of all 4. He was able to bounce from being energetic to being direct to being analytical to being a chameleon, and understanding the strengths and weaknesses of all of them, and utilizing the strengths across the board. So that is that tangent as far as shooting your shot, making sure that you are not sticking yourself into the introverted, into the extroverted side of everything. So make sure you're shooting your shot. Producing scroll-stopping social media content, that's going to be something there. Go through mindset building for a well-rounded monk mode. The professor goes through what a monk mode is. Essentially, it's a set routine of how to get your mind in the right spot. I'll let you guys get into the community and figure out what that is. A dozen different types of forms and PDFs to make your entire process simpler. There is literally broken down PDF forms every step of the way to give you all the information you need. It has a video for you to listen and to watch. It has PDF forms for you to read it. And then it has applicable information for you to go out and do it. So that way you're making sure you're encompassing the whole version of the learning curve, because you only retain a certain percentage of information that you listen. You only retain a certain percentage of information that you see. You only retain a certain percentage of information that you are physically watching somebody else do. And then you retain the most amount of information, percentage-wise, of the information that you actively go and apply it. So it gives you the best of every world, and you're able to get the greatest probability for success, essentially. Cannot promise anybody success. I'm not going to say that you're going to become a millionaire. I'm not going to say this is going to be super easy. I will say that the course is simple. It's to the point. It has the information you need to become whatever you make of it. But again, you have to own the process. You got to be the one that goes out and does all the work. So That is the SMMA course. I'm very excited to be able to present that to the community and going for the announcement. So we're looking at the Amazon dropshipping course being publicly available for the King's Work Education Community Wi-Fi University. It's going to be publicly available for everyone on March 27th. That is going to be when, let's see, we have the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th podcast episode will be coming out, and that 7th podcast will be coming out will be the same time that course is made available for everybody in the community. So get into the community. Make sure you guys are bouncing ideas off everyone. I would highly recommend getting into the SMMA side of everything, get into the Ghost YouTube creation, which is what we're going to be covering in episode 4 of the RedKatanas Podcast. So that's that.
Let's talk business. If you're navigating the challenges of entrepreneurship or looking to take your business to the next level, you need the expertise of King's Work. With over a decade of experience, King's Work is your go-to consulting agency. For strategic planning to execution, they've got the royal touch to make your business reign supreme. Visit kingswork.win and schedule your consultation today. Trust me, they're the kings of getting things done.
We have 2 different segments that I want to go over. One I just made up on the spot because I like it. I talked about a book in the first episode, and I want to say I've quoted books in the first 2 as well as this episode, and I kind of want to get a segment where I put a recommendation out for a book and kind of give you a brief synopsis and why I think it would be a valuable read for everyone. I recommend everyone get into reading, regardless of whether it is going to be a page. If you want to read for 5 minutes, sure. If you are an avid book reader already and you love fiction or you love nonfiction already and you're into self-help books and this is just a good resource for you to kind of get an idea of what the next book should be, I'm going to be giving a book recommendation after every main segment for the RedKatanas Podcast. So, book recommendation for episode 3 of the RedKatanas Podcast is going to be Power versus Force. It's an amazing book. It talks about the difference between, obviously, power versus force, but how understanding how power comes from within. It has a different type of energy. People respect power. Let's see, what is the word I'm looking for? Indirectly. They respond to power indirectly because it's when they are around power, it makes them act in a different way because they want to. Force is based off of man-made, very conscious, surface level deeds and actions that you do that don't actually produce results that have longevity. Power is based in a bunch of different things. Again, it's a good read. I want to say it's probably like 300-400 pages long. It's a good read. I love reading that book. It gives really good insight into the well-rounded version of what a person is. And I would say a person is based off 4 different sections of being a human. I would say it'd be the physical side, the mental side, the emotional side, and then the spiritual side. So it kind of taps into all 4 of those. If one of them is not something you're interested in reading about, fantastic. That's fine. Just skim over those parts. But highly recommend going and diving into that book, Power versus Force. If you go to kingswork.win, it's actually the first book on the book recommendations tab across the top. Go ahead and go and check that out on Amazon. And the cool thing about reading, I would say, is that every time you read a book, unless you read it, even if you read it all in one shot, every time you read a book, you always get different information from it, if that makes any sense. You read a book once, it's one book. If you read a book twice, for whatever reason, you get different information. You're in a different spot in life, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, whatever. You end up reading the information out of the book in such a different light that it becomes an interesting way of rereading books. And so I really like rereading books just to get, obviously, the information to recap it, but also to understand a different perspective maybe. Maybe I'm in a different spot mentally. I'm looking for different pieces of information that I wasn't looking at before. So that is that. Then let's get into the next segment of the 3 tips. Tips for streaming, tips for getting into business, and exploring new ways to start making side money. First tip is going to be for streaming. Interact with your viewers. Foster a sense of community by engaging with your audience. Respond to comments, ask questions, and make your stream an interactive experience. Viewers are more likely to stick around in return if they feel a connection with you. Building a supportive community can be a significant factor in the success of your streaming endeavors. Absolutely. Like I said early in the podcast, people are the most important thing. Making connections with people just makes I wouldn't say easier, but it makes a more streamlined version of going through life, because the better the people that you are around, the better you are at creating good relationships with good people. It makes things, I'm going to say simpler, because I can't say easier, because life is hard regardless of what you do. So next tip is going to be getting into business. Network and build relationships like we were just talking about. Networking is crucial in business. Attend industry events. It's a good idea to be able to get into different events for whatever industry you're wanting to get into. I don't know what you are, what your background is, what you're trying to do. Are you trying to get into the HR accounting world of everything as far as business is concerned? Are you trying to get into the contracting side of everything as far as construction is concerned? Are you trying to get into streaming? Are you trying to get into being an author? Whatever your realm it is, there are groups everywhere, all over the world, that are gathering together, sharing ideas, collaborating, and that is the best place to, at least, even if it's not just to start, it can be for starting, it can be for moving on in a career, like you're in the middle of it, you're in the plateau of whatever you're trying to do, and you're trying to get to the next level. An event is definitely a great way to be able to get that done. Join online forums. The internet is an amazing tool. I would highly recommend using it. Connecting with professionals in your field. Networking with people that are better than you in a specific field. I recommend doing that all the time for everything. For everything from parenting to being in relationships to running a business to being in school. Get around people that are better than you and be in the room. If you're in a room and you are the best person in that room, you're in the wrong room. You need to be uncomfortable not being the best in a room. You've got to be uncomfortable. That's probably one of the biggest assets that school actually did for people, is when you go from elementary to middle school, you go from being the oldest to now you're the youngest. You go from knowing the most to not knowing anything. And then you go from middle to high school, and you go from being the big bad dogs of the freaking middle school playground to going to high school, and no one cares about the playground. It's a confusing thing, but it's a really good asset for you to get used to. Get used to being uncomfortable around people that are better than you. Building strong relationships can lead to valuable partnerships, mentorships, opportunities that may not be apparent otherwise. Your network can be a valuable asset throughout your business journey. That's self-explanatory. Exploring new ways to start making side money. Utilize online platforms. Hanging out with people, getting good with being with people, and utilizing the internet. Leverage the power of online platforms to showcase and monetize your skills, whether it's offering freelance services on platforms like Upwork or Fiverr, selling handmade crafts on Etsy, or creating digital products for platforms like Gumroad. The internet provides numerous opportunities to turn your skills and hobbies into side income. Research different platforms that align with your strengths and interests. And that is the end of the RedKatanas Podcast. Go ahead and subscribe on YouTube, leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, and follow me on social media. On Instagram, it's Kingswork Live. If you go to Twitter, it's The Kingswork. And if you go to and you're watching me stream, it's going to be twitch.tv/The Kingswork. I am on youtube.com/The Work of Kings. Much love, own your life, guys, and God bless.